Hello YouTubers, welcome to Big Buddha Sees All. I'm Big Buddha and today I'm going to be looking at another favourite of mine, The Princess Bride. I say another favourite of mine. I was asked a couple of years ago, I was on holiday with some family and friends and we did Desert Island movies, like Desert Island Discs on Radio 4, but with movies. And they asked me, everyone had to pick their top 8 favourite films. I can't. I was trying to remember what they were today, and I could only remember 7 of them actually. But definitely in there, if you're interested. There was Back to the Future, A Clockwork Orange, Oh Lucky Man, The King of Comedy, With Nell and I, Martin Scorsese's The Last Waltz, and The Princess Bride. I think the other one might have been The Big Lebowski. Couldn't say for sure. So those are all films that I do intend to look at in the future. So a lot of 5-star reviews coming up, and this is a 5-star film, if you ask me. 1986, directed by Rob Reiner, who is famous for directing This Is Spinal Tap, When Harry Met Sally, A Few Good Men, and Misery. Screenplay by William Goldman from his own novel. William Goldman is probably one of the best Hollywood screenplay writers of maybe the last half a century. He wrote Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, The Sting. He adapted Stephen King's Misery, which Rob Reiner directed as well. He also did Marathon Man, I believe that was his, and that like The Princess Bride is from his own novel. Haven't seen that in a long time. I'll have to give that another look. He also did the screenplay, another Stephen King adaptation for Dreamcatcher, which has its critics, and I can understand why, but that's a film I actually quite like. That's a guilty pleasure of mine. No guilty pleasures on my top 8 list, I wouldn't say. I think I put my top 8 down as all being genuinely good films. If I was looking at them critically, I say that because I don't think you really choose your favourite films in life. They're the ones that choose you. And I thought afterward, well, I thought when I was making the list, like, what defines your favourite film? And for me, I mean, obviously you've got to like the film, but for me, it's rewatchability, the rewatchability factor. As I said in my King of Comedy review, I rarely rewatch stuff after I've watched it. So if I do find myself rewatching something, it's obviously clicked with me, and I found that with everything in my list, that there's something. I can't even define what it is, but there's something about all those films that make me want to go back and revisit them. And The Princess Bride is no exception. That's why it's on the list. It's a film I probably saw when I was 9 or 10. It was given to me on VHS. I wish I still had the VHS copy, because this is the special edition cover. It says "The Greatest Tale of True Love and High Adventure." Now I remember the VHS copy, which had the poster of the 4 main characters, and Andre the Giant holding up the bridge like he does in the film. Not the bridge. What do you call that? The gate. The gate. It had the quote from the film that Peter Falk says in it about all the elements that are in the film, high adventure. I can't remember what it is. A big long list of the virtues of the film, and at the end, laughs, and at the end, and true love. And I mean, this film. It works. It works on two levels because it is a nod to kind of old Hollywood and 1940s, 30s swashbuckling adventures. If this had been made back then, it would have had Errol Flynn in the central role. But on the on the other hand, there's also another element to it, which is not a send up of the genre, but it is a very funny film, and there's an almost satirical edge to it as well. So and you don't get many fantasy comedies, so that makes the film feel very unique. The plot is basically you have Buttercup. She's a farm girl, and on her farm is Wesley, the farm boy. And she's a bit of a bratty character at first. Doesn't treat him very well, but she just orders him about, and he says, "As you wish, as you wish." That's all he ever says, and. Like as Peter Falk, the narrator, says in the film, after a while she realised that "as you wish" meant "I love you." So the pair fall in love. He goes off to find his fortune, and then she hears back that he's been killed on the high seas. He goes to sea to find his fortune. Cut forward 5 years, and she's now engaged to the evil Prince Humperdinck, and on the eve of their wedding, she is kidnapped by 3 mercenaries played by Andre the Giant, Mandy Patinkin, a man called Mandy, and Wallace Shawn, and they make and she's kidnapped by these 3 and held to ransom, and then the dread pirate Roberts shows up. Basically vanquishes all 3. That's about as much as the plot as I really want to tell you about, because then I'll be getting into spoiler territory, and the plot of this film is so rich. It needs to be. If you've never seen the film, you're in for a treat, because it needs to be savoured for the first time. And as an extra element to the film, I should mention that the film begins in modern day America, in a child's bedroom played by Fred Savage. He's ill, and his grandfather comes around. So it starts off and he's playing computer games, and he's off school, and his grandfather, played by Peter Falk, Columbo, comes round, and to cheer him up, he reads him the book of The Princess Bride by S. Morgenstern, and of course, he being an 80s child, he's dismissive at first. He wants to play his computer games. He doesn't want to get bogged down in literature, but of course by the end of the film he's engrossed in the story and wants his grandfather to come back and read him the story again the next day, as many children were, I think, when they watched this, the film version of this. It rings so true, because I was the same age as the child in the film. He's played by Fred Savage of The Wonder Years. And I think I watched this film over and over again as a child, as the child character in the film wants to have the story reread to him over and over again. So that element of it rang very true. I'll talk. I want to talk a little bit about the cast in this because this is one of my favourite ensemble casts. I think everyone is pitch perfect in the role. You have Carrie Ells. I'm not sure how you pronounce his name, but he's an English actor. He crops up in things now and again. I think most people might recognise him from the first Saw movie. He's the guy that hacks his leg. Well, I'm probably never going to review Saw because I'm not. Well, maybe I will, but one day. But spoiler: if you haven't seen Saw, the guy who's got his leg handcuffed to the radiator ends up sawing it off at the end. Well, that guy's Carrie Ells. He's Robin Hood Men in Tights, the Mel Brooks film. He played Robin Hood in that, and he's a very, very likable actor. He's absolutely perfect for this sort of Errol Flynn role. He's well spoken, toffee English. Looks the part, but he's great at comedy as well. I've seen him in other things. His timing is spot on, and he does with comedies. I think I'm more of a fan of actors who can do comedy well rather than comedians mugging for the camera. Although I have a place in my heart for that. But he's definitely an actor who can do comedy very well. Who else have we got? Andre the Giant. He was a wrestler. Sadly, no longer with us. William Goldman actually wrote the role specifically with him in mind. He met Andre the Giant first, and before he wrote the novel, he thought, I've got to write a role for this guy. So he wrote the role of Fezzik the Giant for Andre the Giant. He's not the greatest actor in the world, but neither is Arnold Schwarzenegger. But he's perfect for the role. He didn't really need to be the greatest actor in the world. He just needed to be himself, and he played it with aplomb. He did genuinely suffer from giganticism in real life. He was, I think, 7 foot tall and as wide as this room, and apparently making this film was, I think, one of the most happiest times of his life. People have said in retrospect. So. But I think he died in the 90s. You have Wallace Shawn, who plays Vincini. I think he's most notable for his catchphrase "inconceivable." If you've ever heard anyone say that, I don't. You must have heard somebody say that at some point. This is where it's from. The Princess Bride. Wallace Shawn, interestingly, he plays a comedic role in this, and I've seen him in a lot of other things, and he plays. He usually gets the comedic role if you see him in anything sort of mainstream, certainly, which is interesting because he comes from a theatre background. Before he made this, he made a film called My Dinner with Andre, which is about as art house movies get. It's two theatre darlings having dinner together, and I think it was based on a real event, and just a very in-depth conversation in which they philosophize about life and the world, and they decided to turn this into a film, and it's just two men having dinner. But that's very much the world that Wallace Shawn comes from, is art house movies and avant-garde theatre, and I don't think he ever saw himself as being specifically a comedic actor, which is strange really, because he has such a funny screen presence. He looks I mean, he's a short, bald chap. He looks funny, and he has a funny voice. So yeah. I mean, I've never seen him play Hamlet, so I mean, I guess he was typecast after this film, whether that was a good or bad thing. Mandy Patinkin, he's fantastic in as what's the character's name? Oh, Amigo Montoya. Of course, he says it. He has. I think one of the great things about this film is every character has an immortal line almost. With Vincini, it's inconceivable, and with Inigo Montoya, it's her. Well, his backstory is he's looking for the man who killed his father, and he says, when I meet the man who killed my father, his father was slain by a six-fingered man. He says, oh, he fought him in the past and lost, and he has this brilliantly impassioned speech. There's nothing over the top about it, but he just very calmly explains to the Dread Pirate Roberts what he's going to do when he meets the six-fingered man. To him, he says, and next time I meet him, I will not fail. I will walk up to the six-fingered man and I will say, hello, my name is Amigo Montoya. You killed my father. Prepare to die. Brilliant, obviously delivers it so much better than I ever could. And of course, the six-fingered man does appear later on in the film. One of the other members of the cast is revealed to be the six-fingered man, and they have the duel to end all duels at the end of the film. Well, there's two duel to end all duels. There's in this film, there's when the Dread Pirate Roberts and Inigo Montoya meet for the first time, and the Dread Pirate Roberts has to vest him. He basically has to. The Dread Pirate Roberts has to show his worth, so he vests Inigo Montoya first with the sword. Then he vests Andre the Giant second, to show he's very strong, and then he has to take on Vincini in a battle of wits to show he's very intelligent. In actual fact, of course, the audience know that it's no real victory, the last one, because the great thing about Vincini is he's a character who only thinks he's very, very intelligent, and the audience and the rest of the world see him for what he is, a bit of a chancer who got lucky. But he has to vest him in a battle of wits involving poison in a glass. One of the not glasses. One of the goblets is poisoned, and Vincini has to figure out which one is which. This is this one of the scenes where you get one of my favourite lines in the film is, of course, at the end. He says to the Dread Pirate Roberts, "What in the world can that be?" Dread Pirate Roberts looks. He swaps the goblets, and then he says, "Okay, you drink from your glass. I'll drink from mine." They both drink. The Dread Pirate Roberts says, "You chose wrong." He says, "You only think I did. You fell for the world's greatest blunder. The second greatest is never get involved in a land war in Asia. But the first is never go up against a Sicilian when death is on the line." I think that's absolutely brilliant, because, I mean, it sounds like a funny line when you watch it as a kid, even if you don't quite know the context of it. But then I remember watching it. Like I say, this is a film I've watched over and over again, and I remember it was probably like on the 15th time that I watched that film that I suddenly clicked on. They've stuck a reference to William Goldman has stuck a jab at the Vietnam War into what is essentially a fairy tale for kids. Brilliant. You don't. You don't get lines like that in Tim Burton's Alice in Wonderland. Chris Sarandon, who probably is most famous for this and Fright Night, the original Fright Night. He's the villain of the piece. Really good, solid work from him. I think he looks a bit like Christopher Lee. A younger Christopher Lee, sort of a Dracula era Christopher Lee, but maybe I'm alone in that. Christopher Guest from Spinal Tap. I'm gonna have to review Spinal Tap. Spinal Tap is a mock documentary about rock musicians with low IQs, and he plays a really stupid rock musician in that. He's really funny, and as I said, that's a Rob Reiner film, so he got cast in this, and he's what I guess you'd call him a sociopath in this. I think there's something really funny about characters with no moral compass or characters who almost delight in maybe he's not a sociopath, maybe he's a sadist. He develops this machine to reduce people's lives, and he can up it to a year. Water runs through it, and he at one point they have Wesley on a table, and they're torturing him for information, and he's just so smarmy and sinister, but really funny in this scene. So Christopher Guest, I mean, he's someone, he makes his own films mainly, but he's someone who's been criminally underused by movies. Am I missing anyone out? Robin Wright as Buttercup. Yeah, I mean, she... I don't want to say she's the weakest link, because she does precisely what the role requires. It's probably, I mean, it's a film made by men, so the male characters are far more well defined, I think. So for what she's given, she's great. She was nearly, interestingly, Maid Marian in Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves, and then I think she fell pregnant at the last minute. But you can see why off the back of this. It's one of those films. There's when every scene starts, you think, "Oh, great, it's this scene." I really like that one, especially in the first half. You have the scaling of the cliffs of insanity. Obviously it's the greatest swashbuckling duel ever put on film. You have the fire swamp, and where the two lovers are in the fire swamp together, and they have to vest the rodents of unusual size and navigate their way through the quicksand. Mel Smith is in this as an albino monk. Just worth the price of admission on its own, if you ask me. Peter Cook is in this again. Just a very he plays at the end. There's I won't go into too many details, but there's a wedding happening, and he's the curator of the wedding, and he has a speech, it's just one word again, just one word that he's remembered for, but it's he turns around. It's Peter Cook, one of the funniest men who ever lived, and he says, "Marriage, marriage is what brings us together today." I don't think I've ever been to a wedding and not said that at some point. Um, so yeah. So what else to say about this? It was a real step away from for Rob Reiner. He's primarily known for comedies, and I know a lot of people would class this as a comedy. I don't know if I would. I think it is genuinely a bona fide fantasy movie. It's just a really really funny one, and that's by almost by default of having a great script and a director who's primarily known for comedy in this. You can you can kind of see swashbuckling scenes aside, you can kind of see he is more comfortable directing the moments of comedy, which is why those moments really stand out rather than some of the action scenes which I don't want to say they look flat, but it's sort of, whereas in say Tim Burton's Batman films, you can kind of see, although the action scenes in those look very perfectly adequate, they're not really the director's forte, and I think that's probably true of this film, but it doesn't detract anything from the overall enjoyment of it. I'll just that's really the review of the film. I'll talk briefly about the novel, because I read the novel. The novel was published in '73, I think, so 13 years before they made the film, and they were trying to get the film made in all that time. Had a long development period. I think Norman Jewison was going to do it at one point, and I think the framing device of the child in bed, I think that was going to originally take place in the Depression era. It's an interesting one. The book, the plot of the book is fairly consistent with the film. Oh, Billy Crystal and Carol Kane, so just to go back a bit, are also in the film. Again, one of the more distracting elements of the film. It's again, it doesn't take away from anything. I've just realised I've thought of a few faults with this. So I might downgrade this from a 5-star review to maybe a 4.5, just because I guess it's not perfect. But then, is any film perfect? I don't. A discussion for another time, maybe. So the book has a very interesting structure in that you do have when it comes to the fairy tale story, it is fairly consistent with what's in the film. But what's interesting about it, the book, is the framing device of the child really comes from the fact that in the book, Goldman essentially starts off writing a mock tale about himself and how his father used to read him The Princess Bride as a child, and then he gave it to his son when he was ill to read, and he said, "Well, this is terrible. This book's really boring." He said, "How can you say that? This is one of the best books I've ever read. Or at least I thought that when I was your age." Then he says he goes back and reads The Princess Bride and finds out that in actual fact it is a very long, boring book, and there's only a few sort of exciting moments in the novel, peppered in with a lot of rubbish. I think they say there's over 100 pages on the wedding plans alone. So The conceit of the book is that it's an edited version of the original text with all the boring stuff taken out and annotations by William Goldman, annotating another Jewish writer, S. Morgenstern. All a complete fabrication, of course. There never was an original Princess Bride, and there never were a novel, and S. Morgenstern never existed in real life. But an interesting conceit. I guess it would have been too distracting if they'd adapted that wholesale when they'd made the film version. But who knows? I thought that was interesting. And the other interesting thing is, of course, that you get a tease for the first chapter of the sequel novel. That, of course, doesn't exist in real life. I think it's called Buttercup's Baby, the sequel novel that doesn't exist. Oh, and the other interesting thing is, of course, the film ends with a happy ending. They all lived happily ever after sort of ending, and let's get this right. The supposed real life book that doesn't actually exist apparently ends on a cliffhanger, but William Goldman didn't realise until adulthood that the book ended on a cliffhanger because his father always left that out because he thought the cliffhanger ending would be too distracting. Did they or didn't they die? But the fact that there's a sequel, I guess, proves that they didn't die. Go read the book, don't let me explain it, spoon feed you everything. So yeah, that's my review of the Princess Bride. Don't be put off by the title, boys. I know it is the girliest title in the world, but I assure you the film itself isn't that girly. It has a love story in it, sure, but so does Transformers. So that's it. Like I say, I'm wavering now between 4.5 out of 5 or 5 for this film. I guess you'll know when you click on the link. You'll notice I've put a star rating in the titles of all these videos. So I guess you'll see then. Now, so that's my review of The Princess Bride. So if that's all you've tuned in for, you can switch off now. Just a quick word. This is very interesting because I'm coming up to 33 minutes now, and my King of Comedy review my phone cut me off at the 33-minute mark. 3, 2, 1, bye. So so if we're now into part 2 of the video, this might be very short now, so